Silence, the ultimate addiction. And this is true. Silence can be very addicting. It's also important to speak up, but it's important to enjoy the silence and take the time to yourself.
Enjoy the silence.
So let's start. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah, and I'm a life coach based out of downtown Los Angeles. I'm currently going over all 64 gene keys from the book The Gene Keys by Richard Rudd. You can go to genekeys.com, type in your information, your date of birth, place of birth, time of birth, and you'll receive your hologenetic profile. Your hologenetic profile is a set of keys called the Golden Path, which pertain to your spiritual growth. So once you have these keys, you can look up your gene keys, your specific gene keys, and then you can pull up the book and read, or you can watch the specific videos that pertain to you. So on our last show, we went over gene key number 23. Let's do a little recap. So the shadow is complexity. The mind likes to keep itself busy, and therefore it complicates things. It likes to control its environment, and therefore it complicates things. It wants to feel useful, not just the subconscious pumping your heart and, making sure you're breathing and you're alive, but it wants to feel useful. It wants to be your buddy and your friend, and therefore it's going to create a lot of scenarios in your head. It's going to keep you very busy. Now, this shadow creates misunderstandings on two different levels, by saying the wrong thing and by saying it at the wrong time. If you're an introvert, unfortunately, you're going to sound dumb because you're going to be choked up by fear. You're not going to want to speak up your truth. You're just going to want to blend with everybody else, not confront anyone. However, if you don't speak your truth, if you don't talk about your values and your morals or whatever that's bothering you, unfortunately, you're going to sound dumb. You're not speaking up. Now, if you're an extrovert, you're going to be fragmented. You're going to over-explain. It's the contrary. It's the opposite. Instead of being choked up, you start over-explaining. You overdo it, and therefore you're confusing people. You have this fear in your tone, and therefore it's throwing people off. So you're fragmented. Some of the most bloodiest wars have started because of a few misconstrued words. So this is how important it is to communicate effectively. Hearing yourself very clearly means that you also hear others very clearly. If you're blurred out inside, you're going to hear everything on the exterior also blurred out. So the ancient Chinese referred to this 23rd hexagram of the I Ching splitting apart, because your words is dividing people instead of uniting people. However, ultimately, the splitting apart is a good thing, because by being apart, you realize that you're apart because of your own doing and no one else's. So that realization is a wonderful thing. So it's caused by being ineffective with your words. Consequently, you split apart, and then therefore you reunite by realizing why you've split apart. So everything has a lesson in here. So the other lesson is that by being in the shadow of complexity, you slowly realize that either being dumb or fragmented isn't working for you. People don't understand you. You slowly move into the gift. And what's the gift? Simplicity. So you start speaking only when it's time to speak. You don't overdo it and you don't underdo it. You speak when it's time to speak, and you're effective at it. You're simple. You get straight to the point. The secret within the 23rd gift is a simple life is a happy life. So if you want to be happy, you got to keep it simple. So as your mind clears through simplicity, you have more time to be with yourself. You have more time to be in the present moment. Less jargon, less clutter, less small talk, straight to the point, and therefore your thoughts become also more effective. You have way more space in between. And through this space, you have time to contemplate and actually take action that's going to change your life instead of being stuck in that pattern. So then you start contemplating your own existence. And then you start going inward instead of outward. So the people that live within the 23rd gift are wonderful comedians. They have incredible sense of humor. They're on the ball You can't predict what they're going to say. And their timing is spectacular. So this reminds me of Robin Williams. He was incredible with that. Somebody would just suddenly come on stage and he would blur out some incredible comedic jokes. Don Rickles is another one. So another amazing comedian. So Don Rickles was a wonderful stand-up comedian. OG, one of the first ones out there. And same thing. Very politically incorrect, but my God, he would roast. He was like one of the first people that ever invented roasting. He was a master at it, a master. Now, I don't recommend roasting anybody or bullying anybody or making fun of anybody whatsoever. But Don Rickles was the number one. He was really good at what he did. So it's all a matter of frequency. At the shadow level, it's awkward. You complicate things. You don't have a lot of friends because people don't want to hang out around you. People just misunderstand you. And then at the gift level, you're a comedian. Everyone wants to be around you because you make everybody laugh. So as you can see, it's a question of frequency. Where are you in the frequency? If you're in the low frequency, again, it's not bad. If you're in the low frequency, it means you're in the shadow. You just have to move through the shadow into the light, through the gift and through the city. So you come out of the shadow of complexity, you become simple, and then you make people laugh. And naturally, you don't even try, it comes out naturally. So once you're in the 23rd gift, for a while, you hit the city level. So what's the 23rd city? The 23rd city is quintessence. You become quintessence. It refers to the so-called magical fifth element or ether that was believed to be inherent in all things. So this city, the 23rd city, has an alchemical flavor to it. The people that have attained this city are able to touch the gold in other people's hearts. They know exactly what to say, or it can just be a gesture. And they'll know how to touch specifically the heart of that person for them to become more enlightened, more conscious. So they help awaken others. And with minimal speech, it can just be a look, a gesture, and it'll resonate with the other person exactly the way they need to understand it or to feel it. They can transmit the power of the awakened state. Every person has a unique key to open them to a higher frequency. And the people with the 23rd city of quintessence know exactly what that key is. And it's for each, just like the comedian that's on point with timing, they'll know exactly what to say at the right time to the right person to change them, alchemicalize them, to change them and transmute them for good. And this is why their words at that time is potent. So it's not, their words are going to be important a week later, a month later. No, it's when they speak to you, it's at that time that the words have the most effect. So once you're at this city, every thought that's useless dissipates and goes into your aura as light and energy. So your aura becomes stronger and stronger because you eliminate more and more thoughts. And as you eliminate more and more thoughts, they dissipate. They don't linger around anymore. And you only get their energy, their positive energy. There's no way to trigger this event. You can place events on a timeline if you wish, but it's not going to be in your control. The moment you hit the city is the moment you become ripe, and you will not know when you're ripe. It's not random, it's spontaneous. So it talks about the middle way, Buddha's middle way. So it's not the left-hand path, which is the logic, the mathematics, the science. And it's not the right-hand path, which is the poet, the artistic. However, it's a middle way. And by saying middle way, they don't mean a little bit of both or, a ratio of this one versus that one. No, it's a path of complete abandon. You just go with your heart. You go with your intuition. You don't have a set way. You don't select the left or the right. It's literally a path of complete abandon. You go where the flow goes. You go with the flow. In that middle way, it's true that it's very scary, but again, in that darkness, in that void, you have unlimited possibilities. and therefore it's a way that you simply cannot predict. Probably the most adventurous way, if you ask me. So, on a wonderful gene key, who wouldn't want to be at the 23rd city of quintessence and know exactly how to touch people's hearts? Wonderful, wonderful city. Okay, so in today's gene key, we're going over gene key 24. So gene key number 24. Silence is the ultimate addiction. And it's very true. Silence can be very addictive. Very, very addictive. There's a song by Depeche Mode called Enjoy the Silence.
Enjoy the silence.
Which means silence is so beautiful that you should enjoy it. I enjoy silence a little too much. And I gotta come out of the silence once in a while. So gene key number 24. Silence, the ultimate addiction. Programming partner, 44th gene key. It's part of the codon ring, the ring of life and death, which consists of gene key number 3, 20, 23, 24, 27, and 42. Physiology, it's part of the neocortex. Amino acid, leucine. So, the 24th shadow, addiction. So the 24th shadow, addiction. The great genetic glitch. The great genetic glitch. The 24th shadow, when correctly understood, explains much about the shadow state itself, as well as why human beings find it so difficult to resolve the deeper repetitive problems in their lives. This is the shadow that keeps the psychology profession in business, and it is the shadow that big advertising companies take full advantage of. We humans come pre-programmed for addiction, and the main culprit responsible for this is our minds. A well-known urban myth states that we only use a very small percentage of our brains, but any neuroscientist will tell you that that is untrue. In an average day, we use almost all of our brains. It is not how much of our brain we use, it is how efficiently we use it. As it stands today, the human brain is still such unexplored territory for consciousness. The way in which you use your brain is determined by your genetics, so that some people think more logically and others more laterally. Let's compare the circuitry of the brain to the 88 keys on the piano. We can say that the piano keys offer almost infinite potential for creating music and melody. However, in the case of our brains, we tend to find the tunes that we like and play them over and over. That's what I do when I love a song. I put it on repeat until I get sick of it. But I'll listen to it like nonstop on repeat. You know, you do that with the things you love. You place them in loop over and over again. Many people don't really think for themselves at all, but have learned conditioned patterns from their parents and their environment and keep following those patterns their whole lives. Of course, everyone uses their brain all the time, but it is relatively rare for someone to find an entirely new way of thinking. Synaptic routes within the ganglia of the brain become as trodden and familiar as public pathways, and the 24th shadow works hard to keep it that way. The mass consciousness of humanity is still dominated by the archaic fear and survival-based aspects of our brain. This fear is a powerfully pervasive force within the chemistry of the human body. The 24th shadow creates a low-frequency rhythm throughout your whole being, and this frequency prevents you from thinking outside your comfort zone, which exists on a physical, emotional, and mental level. We generally follow the same predictable paths in our external lives that our brains follow neurologically. This gives rise to the phenomenon known as addictive behavior. When we talk here of addiction, we are not talking about specific psychological disorders, but of an entire human behavioral code that is so self-limiting it does not recognize its own addiction. The fact is that all modes of thinking are addictive. You can be a left brain addict or a right brain addict, and you will be equally addicted. The only thing that breaks addictive thinking is silence, real silence. As we shall see, it is silence that gives birth to the 24th gift of invention, the art of thinking and acting in totally original ways. Every cycle of addiction has natural gaps within it, and human beings experience these gaps in awareness. They can occur at any time, and they confront you directly with your own suffering. At such times, you will generally feel a profound sense of emptiness that is deeply uncomfortable. Our general response to these gaps in awareness is to try to avoid them, either through numbing ourselves or distracting ourselves. The shadow of addiction ensures that people don't really change. Even though we may seek new ways of being, we usually end up following our addiction on the outside and never changing on the inside. You only have to look at a person's action in the world to see whether they are living in a state of addiction or the higher state of invention. If they are influenced by the shadow state, there is always an anxious part of them that never seems to rest. Even though they may make cosmetic changes in their outer life, they never create anything substantially original. This pattern also tends to play out in their relationships, where they often find themselves repeatedly reliving the same scenarios without realizing why. Even if they change the outer relationship for what that promises to be completely different, the same tactics show up again, manifesting an inner neurological patterning that they seem unable to escape. It is important to understand the mechanics of the shadow of addiction in order to find the root of this deepest of human suffering. One way to enter into this mystery is using the model of the Corpus Christi mentioned in the 22nd gene key. Watch that video. The Corpus Christi refers to the 7 bodies, layers, or sheaths of a human being. To really understand the mechanics of your suffering, you have to consider the 3 densest bodies and their relationship to each other: the physical, the astral, and the mental. The root of human suffering is wired into your DNA, in the physical body, the very densest body of the 7. It is the primal sacred wound running throughout humanity, and its single purpose is to eventually trigger your awakening. The next body to the physical, in terms of vibration, is the astral body, out of which all your desires emerge: your sexuality, emotions, longing, craving, and feelings. Whereas the physical body simply has essential needs such as food and warmth, the astral has cravings, which are inessential to survival. The primal wound is our perceived separation from the totality, and the astral body responds to this wound through desire. All desires are really rooted in a single desire: the desire to escape the suffering caused by the primal wound and return to the pure state of unity. If you could look deeply enough into this desire without acting on it, it would actually burn itself out, which is the underlying purpose of meditation. The next aspect of the story of your suffering is found in the mental body, the mind. Your mind reacts to the desires of the astral body and tries to think its way out of suffering. Addiction begins in the interaction of these 3 lower bodies. Your mind builds images, stories, and projections around the desires of the astral body, which sets you on an addictive course of behavior aimed at relieving this suffering. Because the mind functions across time, its main tendency is to base hope of happiness on the future rather than accepting the real conditions of the present moment. The external civilization designed by humanity feeds the mind's strategy of trying to escape suffering and find happiness in the future. It is designed by the shadow for the shadow, which is why it is so challenging to transcend the shadow consciousness in everyday life. Nothing external can bring an end to your suffering since it is rooted deep within your DNA. Only when you turn inward and look for the source of your suffering will you finally face the addictive quality of your own mind. The programming partner of the 24th shadow is the 44th shadow of interference, which is responsible for the dysfunctional relationships that occur across our planet and which are the current norm. This dysfunction is the byproduct of a universal glitch in the genetic operating system of humanity, and it is reinforced by the 24th shadow. Addiction is the constant replaying of the same perspective frame with no pause between frames, and this is what happens at a synaptic level within the brain chemistry of an average human. Like mice in spinning wheels, we simply reenact the same scenarios over and over without realizing what we are doing. The question then is, how do you escape the wheel of addiction and reset the program to run without the glitch? The full answer to this question lies within the 24th gift, but in a nutshell, the very realization that you are in an addictive pattern begins to shift the programming of the 24th shadow. So once you realize that you are in the shadow, that's the key. Once you realize about your patterns, your addictive patterns, now addiction can be both physical and mental. As you can see, we have more than just one level of a body layer. So physical, if you go towards drugs, alcohol, nothing to be ashamed of here. It's, completely normal to have coping mechanisms. However, it's not normal to, have them and use them for a long time. So, you use your coping mechanism while you're in the shadow of addiction, either thought patterns or physical, or it can just be cravings from your astral body, mind, physical, and astral. So once you realize that, hey, my life is a loop, it's a programming code. It doesn't matter. It can be C++, Visual Basic, hey, even assembly language. Let's go really far with this. Doesn't matter. It's the loop. The language doesn't matter. Now, if anyone has taken computer science, you would know. It doesn't matter. The language. How you code is the secret. SQL, coding for a database, is different than coding in assembly. Absolutely. But what do they all have in common? They all use loops. Just like in songs, you have choruses. You have repeating sentences that keep coming back throughout the whole song. And same thing with your DNA. We have loops. And that's where you catch your loops. You're like, you know what? This is deja vu. I've been in this situation before. Hey, hold on. I thought I got over this. Guess not. It's a loop. You got to get yourself out of the loop. Your willingness to confront your mind creates the necessary pause between the frames, allowing the mental body to disentangle itself from the astral body. When this happens, then for the first time, the astral body and its cravings are no longer fueled by the grasping of your mind, and you go much deeper into the source of your suffering. You purify the astral body through starving it of external stimulation, and thus you enter into the holy ground of pure desire, the desire to return to your true source. So, by starving your cravings, by creating gaps between the frames of your mind, you'll see that the energy will fizzle out. It'll die off. Your cravings will go away. And once your craving goes away, once you create gaps between the frames, then you can start controlling the situation. You're no longer part of the programming. You slowly change the programming by realizing that you are in a program. So, the repressive nature. What's the repressive nature of this shadow? What happens if you're an introvert and you're manifesting this shadow internally? You become frozen. The repressive nature is frozen. When a repressive nature has come across a gap in their awareness, the fear inside them causes them to freeze up. This freezing can manifest in many ways. Physically as a complete lack of energy, emotionally as depression, and mentally as a narrow-minded and guarded perception of reality. The secret to all addiction lies in how we respond to these gaps in the functioning of our awareness. The danger of addiction is that we seal our fate in these precious moments without realizing we are doing it. At the shadow frequency, we simply do not allow ourselves to experience the void that precedes a shift in awareness. The repressive nature shrinks from feeling that empty state of silence. If we were to face such times in our lives without either shrinking or reacting, something truly amazing would seed itself in us. So what happens if you're an extrovert manifesting this shadow? What's the reactive nature of the shadow of addiction? So the reactive nature of addiction is anxious. You become anxious. The reactive side of the 24th shadow, like the repressive side, is unwilling to fully experience their feelings of emptiness. This feeling of emptiness occurs to all human beings at different times in their lives. The gaps that open up before us can throw us into panic. If we react actively instead of passively, we do so out of anxiety. In order to escape the feeling of falling into a bottomless pit, we translate our fear into activity, and that activity obscures the potential magic that could have occurred inside us. Essentially, there are two kinds of addicts. There are those who numb themselves, the repressed nature, and those who stimulate themselves, the reactive nature. The reactive nature is more typically of a workaholic or gambling type, as opposed to the repressive nature, which might exhibit an alcoholic type of addiction. These people who cannot sit still, but are flooded with the anxiety that comes from avoiding the powerful and absolutely natural chemical process that is taking place inside them. So once you're in this shadow for a while, you're in the addictive pattern. Either mental, astral, it doesn't matter. The three densest bodies are affecting you the most. How do you get out of it? There was a little clue earlier while I read the shadow. So you get out of the shadow of addiction through invention, the wonderful gift of invention. So the 24th gift, invention. Resting in the gap. In discussing the 24th shadow, we have examined the idea of being caught in a set of addictive behavioral patterns whose very nature conceals those patterns. Added to this, we have seen that such addictions can mutate into different patterns if the individual recognizes a gap between the repeating neurological pathways. Lasting from as little as a second to a week or more, these gaps actually occur spontaneously to everyone. Such gaps can allow an entire gestalt shift to take place in your life, and they can feel very destabilizing if you do not surrender fully to them. Your response to them determines whether they become bridges to another level of awareness or you simply fall back into your familiar ways of thinking and acting. In the case of the 24th shadow, the gap in awareness is fully embraced and therefore reveals its magic. So, instead of running away from the silence, instead of trying to find something to do or say, or, by being anxious, or by freezing up, by shutting down, you actually embell in the silence. You bask in it. You take full advantage within the silence. And that's where ideas come in, inventions come in, new way of thinking comes in, or simply a pause for you to contemplate, right? I got a new book from Richard Rudd, The Art of Contemplation. So you contemplate within that silence, within that pause. And that's where invention comes out. And you can rewrite a brand new program, a brand new loop if you want. So you can have whatever you want to manifest looping until you get sick of it, and then you can change that loop. But it's a question of changing the code. People with this gift either catch themselves avoiding the gap or fully recognize such moments when they arrive. Either way, they do not cower before the fear that precedes these moments, and thus they discover that these gaps in awareness are not frightening at all. So what happens in the gap when you do embrace it? The answer is absolutely anything. The 24th gift is truly magical and contains a secret to genius. Genius is far more than lateral thinking. It is the ability to make quantum leaps. For example, the difference between a very good tennis player and a truly great tennis player is to be found in the 24th gift. The great player follows no set pattern that their opponent can break down, counteract, and defeat. They will throw in shots that are totally unexpected and come at the most intense moments. This is the gift of invention, of bringing new things into the world. The 24th gift is a birth canal for originality and surprises itself as much as others. The brain can be loosely divided into gray matter and white matter, the former being largely involved in the processing of information and the latter in communicating that information. The 24th gift involves a mysterious process that takes place within the deep gray areas of the brain, and this gift seems to act as some kind of neural trigger that allows original thinking to emerge from these areas. The human act of pondering might be an apt description for what occurs through this gift. As you ponder a subject, you first travel familiar neurological pathways around that subject until you arrive at one of those magical gaps. The moment you hit a gap, it is as though you change neurological gear and suddenly a new, more efficient network of synapses opens up in your brain. This allows you to suddenly see things in a totally new light. Ironically, as your brain becomes more efficient, you may well use less of it rather than more. If you can simplify the amount of neural firing in your brain, then ideas and insights may actually become sharper and clearer. The great joke may well be that the smaller the percentage of the brain you use, the more intelligent you become. One of the best ways of exploring the gaps is through the art of contemplation. Another amazing book. I already finished it. It's a very small compared to the Gene Keys, so I highly recommend you buying it. Super small. You can read it in a day, and it does change the way you see things and contemplate things. So I highly recommend it. Contemplation on the mysteries of life and death, on the nature of change and suffering, can lead you into sudden heightened states of awareness. To contemplate is to surrender yourself into the great mystery until it suddenly and unexpectedly reveals itself to you through a process of deep insight. Whether you can communicate your insights successfully is a matter of the 23rd gift, which, like the 24th gift, is a part of the genetic family known as the Ring of Life and Death. The Ring of Life and Death is a complex genetic codon group governing the many processes that bring human beings in and out of form. One of its major symbols is the wheel. It speaks of the mechanical processes that connect the wheeling of the constellations and galaxies to the rotation of the atomic structures deep within our bodies. It is all about those gaps between the cycles, the intervals between lives, the spaces between atoms, the silence between notes. Magic and mutation occur within those gaps. And it's true, 90% of an atom is empty space. So, as you can see, the greater part of an atom is empty. So, same thing with our brains. The silence is where the key lies. The silence is where you can start inventing things. The silence is when you can go within. So, as you can see, the silence is very important, just like the dark matter. We need both in this dualistic world. In human beings, this codon allows you to make quantum leaps in terms of the evolution of your awareness. The 24th gift is the heart of the human creative process. The secret of the 24th gift is really one of the secrets of creativity itself. It is in fact an acoustic field involving the raising of vibrational frequency through your genetics. Each time you hit one of these magical gaps, you have the opportunity to either shift up an octave in frequency or remain in the same loop. One of the truths about addiction is that it can be used creatively to elevate your frequency. Invention is really creative addiction. You simply experience a spontaneous rising of the frequency of the mind's tendency to think in circles. Addiction thinks in circles, whereas invention thinks in spirals. All the great insights that have driven human evolution from the arts to the sciences have come across the bridge of the 24th gift. Only one who is willing to face their own ignorance can cross this bridge. It begins with your willingness to admit that you do not know and that you may never know. This inner honesty creates the environment for invention to occur, even though when it may occur cannot be predicted. It usually occurs when you are at rest, manifesting the gap in some external way yourself, sitting silently, sleeping, dreaming, or simply doing nothing at all. So you're at the 24th gift of invention. You invent your life, you invent your ways, you invent everything. You're no longer part of the programming. You're no longer part of loops anymore. And you're 100% basking in the opportunity to invent your way out of everything. What happens when you're in this gift level for a while? What's the next level? What's after invention? What can possibly be after invention? The 24th city of silence. So the wonderful 24th city of silence. I love it. So it's not that you're not doing anything. You're basking in the silence. It's like, hey, I'm not lazy. I'm basking in the silence. I love it. There's your permission to bask in the silence. Enjoy the silence. The 24th city, silence. Exiting the wheel. The 24th city is a challenging city to write about because how do you describe silence? Obviously, you cannot. What you can do is consider the manifestations of the city and build a context around it. Thus far, we have looked at the nature of addiction and how it can be elevated or transformed into creative invention. We have discussed the way that the brain follows patterns and how these patterns can mutate into newer, more efficient, and more original patterns. When we come to the citic level, we really have to put away the mind altogether. Silence is the natural background state of all human awareness, and silence can only occur when thinking ceases entirely. Over the centuries, human beings have tried all manner of techniques to stop the mind from thinking. Thinking can in fact be masked by certain techniques, but that temporary quietness is not the same as the pure silence of the 24th city. The silence of the 24th city is a silence that descends on you, even though it already lives inside you. It occurs as a result of the shift in the inner geography of human awareness. True silence reigns when the mechanism controlling your awareness moves from your head down into your solar plexus. You cannot say that silence is experienced, because silence invokes the paradox of there no longer being an experiencer to have an experience. So the same paradox, remember a long time ago they would say, if there's a tree that falls in the forest, but there's no one around it to hear it, doesn't make a sound. I probably messed that up, but so if you're not there to hear it, it didn't make a sound, right? Of course it made a sound, but you're not there to hear it, so you can't really confirm. Silence negates everything, fusing together both subject and object. For awareness to shift in this way, some kind of physical mutation has to occur within the human body. Certain chemicals must be created by the endocrine system that prevent the process of normal acoustic thinking. You no longer think, but are thought by life. This is not something that can be described. At the citic level, there is no longer thinking, but there is both knowing and not knowing simultaneously. Not knowing is there when awareness is at rest, and knowing is there when awareness engages in some form of communication with the outside world. Both expressions really amount to the same thing. When the mind ceases to think, then all addictive behavior also ceases. The ultimate addiction of believing yourself to be separate from life is eradicated. In this sense, silence does not necessarily denote physical silence. The silence of the city is an internal silence that is permanently engaged. Just like addiction can be transformed through natural gaps in the functioning of awareness, so the citic state exponentially expands this gap. Awareness itself is shown to be a veil that obscures the true nature of these gaps, which are really windows into the nature of pure consciousness. Pure consciousness is silence or emptiness. It is represented temporarily as a time before the beginning of the world. Only true inner silence can bring an end to the maya or illusion of your separateness. It is the silence that lies between and behind the activity of your thoughts that systems of meditation attempt to induce. The 24th city has other surprises too. The ancient Chinese sages named this 24th hexagram of the I Ching returning, a name with many interpretations and implications. We have already seen how the constant revolving nature of this gene key is played out. It is rather like watching a film reel going round and round over the same series of frames until, at the GIF level, a new set of frames is spliced in before the revolution continues. The circular movement of life returns to the gap of silence, that magical place where evolution and mutation occur. This is the silence between the words of life, or the gaps between the atoms that we have already mentioned, the so-called elusive dark matter of modern physics. In terms of human destiny, our sages have ever sought to explain this returning movement at a metaphysical level, and it has given rise to many of the great mystical theories, two of the most enduring being that of karma and reincarnation. Of particular relevance to this city is the entire doctrine of reincarnation. The sages have long spoken of the greater destiny of the human soul as it incarnates into the world of form, lives out its karmic cycle, and then reincarnates again and again until such time as it transcends form altogether. It is as though human beings have a kind of cosmic addiction to form itself, and until this addiction is broken once and for all, humanity can never be fully free. At this final stage in which the connection with material form is ruptured, the soul is said to become enlightened and returns to the ocean of being, or Godhead. It is easy to see how such doctrines have emerged from the way in which the human mind interprets life through this 24th gene key. In the postmodern age, the West has picked up this primarily Oriental idea of reincarnation and adopted it as a mainstream New Age dogma. Most of the better-known contemporary teachers and gurus speak openly about the fact of reincarnation. Indeed, it is discussed in some considerable depth through the 22nd gene key. However, as the 24th city bears witness, reincarnation is simply one interpretation of a much simpler truth, and from the point of view of the city at least, it is nothing but an illusion. Despite what the teachers may say, most people like the idea of reincarnation because it gives them the sense that there is something about themselves they can hang on to after death. It gives us a sense of continuity and justice underlying all creation. From the point of view of the 24th city, however, reincarnation is simply another human concept born out of the language of the Maya itself. This theme is explored in some depth in the 44th city, which is the programming partner of this 24th city. Both these cities strip the human story down to its purest and simplest form, in which human beings are viewed quite coolly as simply genetic equipment for consciousness to play in. When one piece of equipment dies, it is gone, but it played a part in writing a great transcendent script. Even though the equipment has died, the play must go on, as the saying goes. Or the show must go on. Therefore, what appears to keep returning to the world of form actually never leaves. Bodies are born and die, and their specific awareness functioning dies with them, but the overall consciousness beneath continues. It is silence, undying, intangible, and beyond form. Thus, when you identify with or remember a past life, or even a future life, you are simply reading the information within your fractal line. It is contained within your blood, but no aspect of me survives death except the silence of consciousness itself. How can there be anything other than silence when true silence negates awareness? There is indeed a relative truth within the concept of reincarnation and its culmination in enlightenment. However, the whole attempt to identify with continuity of awareness is a watered-down truth. The only thing that really reincarnates is silence itself. In the 22nd gene key, you can read all about reincarnation, the gradual enlightenment of the various subtle bodies as they incarnate into form, move through the Bardo states, in between lives, and then return again. You can also learn about the causal body, the subtle layer of your being that survives death to carry the essence of your evolution into the next life. But the causal body is seen as an illusion at a certain point in the process, and as it dissolves or shatters, so your enlightenment dawns. At this point, reincarnation ends as you find that gap in the great wheel and exit the whole drama permanently. All of these wonderful descriptions are in fact part of the script of our celestial drama, and their real purpose is to help settle your mind and give it a sense of logical continuity. Nevertheless, stay cognizant of the nature of the vast paradox that hits you at the citic level. All such descriptions are essentially devices within the Maya that may or may not help you to relax within the Maya. The key is always to relax, because only as you relax can you find the magic gaps and experience the truth directly, not through your mind but through your innermost being. Within the flowing story of the gene keys, the 24th city is the great trigger for the enlightenment experience. At a certain point in evolution of every genetic and karmic fractal line, a certain piece of genetic equipment comes into the world that represents the culmination of that line. And as it explodes into its full blossoming, it brings an end to the whole mythic aspect of the human story. As more and more of these people are born, the overall story of humanity will slowly come to an end. When all the stories have been told, all that will remain will be the silence that was there all along, in those magical gaps between the atoms, the notes, the words, and the lives of all human beings. Wonderful, wonderful city. I know I love all the cities. I say that at the end of all the cities, but another amazing city. Just to let you know that embrace the silence. You know, every time we're like in a quiet room, we either go after the TV, either we're going after the phone, or we go after music, or there's always something that we want to replace the silence with. But we should embrace the silence. We should enjoy the silence because the magical moments are in the silence. They're not in the programming. So you start with the shadow of addiction. You're either an introvert and you're frozen physically, mentally, energetically, or you're an extrovert and you're anxious. You're constantly anxious and you want to, fill up the time, fill up the silence with something from the outside. You're reacting to it. So once you're in the shadow of addiction, that you see that your patterns, they're simply loops. They're simply programming codes that are there just like a chorus of a song. It's there automatically. It's up to you to embrace the silence so that you can reprogram yourself. Get rid of these loops. And how do you do that? By inventing your way out through the gift. You catch yourself through the empty space. You catch yourself through the frames. So once you embrace this emptiness, you see that through this emptiness can you invent yourself out. You undo your programming and you start inventing. And invention comes in the silence. Invention comes in the dark. It comes when you're by yourself or with other people, but you can't be distracted. You can't constantly have loops in your head. Inventions can't come when you have loops in your head. So once you stop these loops, you slow them down. You start inventing new ways of living, new ways of thinking. And that's how you get yourself out of these patterns. So once you're in the gift level for a long time, and you're the ultimate inventor, you're the number one inventor in the world, what happens after? Once you're done inventing, you go into pure silence. Now, this city is a little hard to explain because how do you explain silence, right? But it's pure silence. It's not temporary silence anymore. It's not silence because you're meditated and now you're quiet. No, it's the pure consciousness, pure silence, and it's permanent. It doesn't go away. And this is the same silence that stops all reincarnation, because after this moment of silence, of permanent silence for the rest of eternity, you have no reason to come back and reincarnate. You've hit the frequency of, I've learned my lessons, I'm beyond invention, I am pure silence. So this city teaches us to embrace the silence. If you're a quiet person and you enjoy the silence, there's nothing wrong with you. I'm in my 40s and I'm finally enjoying the silence. So you can see, these shadows play out differently in people. Some people are in the shadow for a very long time. Now, I wish I was an inventor. I'm a wonderful inventor when it comes to cooking and organizing my day, my pets, and this is a lot of work, trust me. Very difficult to do it all yourself, but I pull it off. You gotta enjoy the silence. At the end of the day, we all go back to silence. We started in silence and we all end in silence. And therefore, we should all embrace the silence. The 24th city will lead us all towards silence. So, thank you very much. Thank you for your support. Thank you for liking. Thank you for commenting. And thank you for subscribing. On to the next one, Gene Key number 25. In the meantime, enjoy the silence. God bless every single one of you. Ciao.